But right now, from Bearing Arms, I want to welcome our friend Bob Owens to the program. Bob, how you doing, sir?
Hanging in there today, Cam. How are you?
I'm all right. Did you have a good weekend? Get a chance to do any shooting?
Did not have any chance to do any shooting this weekend, but I'm going to squeeze some in a little bit later this week.
Good for you. I confess I did not either. I took my kids to Richmond Comic-Con this weekend instead.
Oh, how'd that go?
What's that? How'd that go? More people in costume per capita than I was expecting, honestly, from a comic convention. But fewer people, fewer attendees overall. Like I'm used to, Bob, you know, when I go out to an event, it's like CPAC or it's the NRA annual meeting. So I'm used to a crush of people. And I will say there was no crush of people at the Richmond Comic-Con. Not even comparable to a gun show in Richmond.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So there you go. Apparently we like our Second Amendment more than we like our comic books in Virginia. I'm kind of okay with that. Now, at bearingarms.com, you have pointed out this column that appeared in the New York Times over the weekend. Lois Beckett from ProPublica talking about the quote-unquote assault weapons, as she puts it, the assault weapon myth. And it's interesting that the New York Times wrote this piece. You know, Lois and ProPublica had that piece last week, Bob, where they quoted a lot of gun control advocates as saying, oh, you know, we've all of a sudden decided we're not interested in banning these guns at all. Not really. I mean, we still don't like them. We still would like to ban them, but it's not really a priority for us now.
Yeah, it almost sounds like they're about to shift targets, doesn't it?
Yeah, and maybe telegraphing a little bit. I think part of what is happening here is, again, they want to pad the resume as much as they can. And, you know, if they got spanked when it came to a gun ban, and the New York gun ban under the SAFE Act hasn't really been effective, the Connecticut ban hasn't really done anything to make people safer, then, you know, in an attempt to portray themselves as so reasonable, to say, well, you know, look, we've moved away from this. Now what we want are background checks. We want to do things that are going to save as many lives as possible, like trying to get grocery stores to ban people from carrying guns rather than ban the guns themselves.
Yeah, and that's exactly what they're going to do. They will never, ever admit that they have ever been wrong. They will avoid the truth at all costs, and they will continually shift goalposts to kind of conceal where they have screwed up. You nailed it when you said that the Connecticut and New York SAFE Acts, those bans have done absolutely nothing to slow or stop crime. When we had the 94 ban under Clinton, that had no measurable effect. If anything, the practical effect of that was to create an entirely new class of concealed carry handguns when they put that 10-round limit on firearms. So they actually kind of helped us out with that. And then it started drawing more people to AR-15s and similar rifles, just because of the fact that everybody wants what they're told not, or that they are told they can't have. So, you know, the AR-15 is the most popular rifle platform in the United States today, and I honestly think we owe a lot of that to the 94 ban and helping create an interest in creating a demand in that classification of firearm.
Yeah, I think you're right to some degree, although I still think that, you know, the market forces, and particularly the number of guys who have served in the military who, you know, grown used to using that platform as sort of their default, you know, long gun, or at least, you know, again, the military version of that. I think we would still see this continued growth, maybe not to the extent that we have, but because you're right, we are, you know, there's something ingrained in our American DNA, Bob. We don't like being told what to do by other people, particularly when these people don't really know the first thing about what they're trying to tell us what to do. So when you have people who don't know a thing at all about firearms, then dictating to gun owners, well, these are the types of guns that you're going to be able to own. Again, it's the same as a nanny state school telling you what to eat, what to drink, what to read, what to think.
It's not just yet another manifestation of the whole better than you syndrome. They have decided, completely on their own, of course, that they are smarter and better educated than everyone else, and they know everything better than everybody else. And so they're going to sit here and try to dictate policy and law to everyone else, even though they don't have the first foggy notion what they're doing. And that is just part and parcel of who and what they are. Mike Bloomberg is a great example of this mindset. He was very successful in one aspect of his life, and then figured that, oh, I'm great at this. I must be just an awesome human being, and I should be telling everybody what to do with every aspect of their lives.
Yeah, and what's really interesting is at the tail end of this New York Times piece, Lois Beckett talks about a guy named David Kennedy. She says, by the way, he's the director of the Center for Crime Prevention and Control of the John Jay College of Criminal Justice. She says he argues that the issue of gun violence can seem enormous and intractable without first addressing poverty or drugs. A closer look at the social network of neighborhoods most afflicted, he says, often shows that only a small number of men drive most of the violence. Identify them and change their behavior, and it's possible to have an immediate impact. He wrote a book about this called, I think it's called Don't Shoot. And, he was involved in the so-called Boston Miracle in the late 90s. And, his ideas are really interesting because they go beyond, they don't really, the gun control debate doesn't really factor into this. He said, because again, what you're dealing with are a small number of individuals that it doesn't make much sense to start thinking about these, grand sweeping rules that would apply to all kinds of people who aren't breaking the law. Go after the hardcore offenders. You don't have to pass a one-gun-a-month law. You don't have to try to, register people's ammunition purchases or ban this gun or ban that gun. Go after the individuals who are committing the crimes, take them out of circulation, and things actually improve.
But see, Mr. Kennedy here is talking about actually solving the problem. And folks who want to ban firearms and fatty foods and big gulps aren't there to solve problems. They are there to try to transfer the power of the individual to the power of the state. And so you're actually not talking about the same people here. Gun control advocates do not care about stopping crime. They care about disarming the citizenry so that the government, which they, to a man, adore, has more power than the individual person does.
Talking with Bob Owens from Bearing Arms. And so we get back to this idea now, Bob, that the gun control advocates, they've learned so much over the past couple of years. And now they've decided that these gun bans, while they still, again, support them, all of a sudden they're not really a priority. First of all, who is that message aimed at? To tell the American people, look, it's not that we like these guns. We still want to ban them, but we know that it's not going to really do anything to ban these guns. So we'd like to take these other steps first.
I don't think it's actually aimed at the American people at large as much as it is the supporters of gun control. They have, time and again, no matter how agitated and shrill they raise their voices, they've failed time and again, and they cannot get the bans that they want put into place. And I think that after this string of defeats in recent years where gun rights are expanding more across the nation than they are constricting, I think it's almost kind of a pep talk saying, it really wasn't our fault. Let's move on to something else. I think that's what they're trying to set up is try to breathe life back into a dying movement. If Bloomberg gets spanked in the 2014 elections, Mom's Demand is going to take yet another big hit. They've been running on the illusions of success with all the recent bullying of restaurant chains and stores, where they've put social media pressure on companies to change their policies, and all the companies have been doing is putting out press releases. I'm not aware of any that have actually changed policies at the stores to prohibit people from, to post businesses so that people can't carry in firearms. So, you can only run on the illusion of success for so long. And so I think they're trying to just cover up their failures and try to pivot to something else, so they haven't exactly indicated what that something else is going to be, except maybe pushing the concept of background checks a little more.
That's really fascinating. And you may very well be right, Bob, but boy, think about that. The offering up this, again, I don't want to say a complete 180, but certainly a change, not just in rhetoric, but as they say, a change in priorities. And it's almost this Emily Latella moment, the never mind, all of what we've been saying for 30 years now, through the Clinton gun ban, with the expiration of the Clinton gun ban, and for the past 10 years that they tried to reinstate another semi-auto ban. Never mind. Now, they won't say you were right, Bob, right? Nor will they say that they were wrong. So instead, they just sort of put their argument into some sort of cold storage, and we won't think about it anymore. It is remarkable that a movement can try to lie to itself like that and be successful at deceiving themselves. And I think, well, if we just don't think about these things anymore, then they really don't matter. It doesn't matter what we said back then.
But Cam, gun control in and of itself is based on lies and deception and fear-mongering. A rational person cannot accept the argument put forth by gun control activists that firearms are to blame for human behavior. That's believing in witchcraft and believing that firearms are a talisman that make people act certain ways. Rational people do not think this way. Scared children and primitive tribes think this way. People who lived in Salem in the 1600s think this way. Rational people who understand science, who understand rationality and understand reason, do not act this way. So they'll be able to pull this off with their supporters because their supporters are irrational in the first place.
Does it? Okay, so here's the next question: does it do anything to gain supporters? Those who are sitting out there on the sidelines right now, looking at this debate, wondering where they come down. I haven't really thought about this issue much, but I'm getting more and more interested. Does this do anything to say, oh well, this is a reasonable crowd? Why they've grown, Bob Owens? They've changed their tone. They seem so reasonable now.
I don't think it's going to help them make any converts at all, and if anything, it could alienate some of the true believers just a bit. They've been buying this story since the late 1980s, early 1990s, that assault weapons are the root of all evil, and now they're admitting that assault weapons never really existed. So how can you sit here after being fed this lie for 30 years and say, wait a minute, I'm supposed to believe you now? And so if anything, I don't think they're going to pick up very many people who think they're reasonable. I think they're going to end up losing quite a few people who realize that they've been conned.
Interesting. And as we're talking here, Mother Jones just tweeted the ProPublica story, why gun control groups have moved away from an assault weapon ban. So this is now making the rounds, this ProPublica story. And, it's fascinating because it's almost like this is the new party line, Bob, and we are seeing this sort of be spread around through the new media. Here's how to adopt the new party line. Here are the new talking points. Everybody get on board here because this is the script that we're sticking with for a while.
I'm sure that they have yet another listserv set up, as they have in the past, another journo list, I believe it was once called, where they get together and they get their talking points together, and then they work through this as good little collectivists do. And so, yeah, they're trying to figure out how to spin it. But, rational folks are going to sit here and look at this argument and go, you lied to me for 30 years. How can I believe anything coming out of your mouth now? So good luck, guys, trying to do this pivot. I don't think it's going to work.
All right, let me give you the ProPublica quote. A couple of them. I'll let you respond here. Dan Gross, there's certainly, president of the Brady campaign, there's certainly a lot of public sentiment around high-capacity magazines and assault weapons. It's easy to understand why people feel so passionate about it. But when you look at this issue in terms of the greatest opportunity to keep guns out of the hands of dangerous people and prevent gun violence, background checks are a bigger opportunity to do that.
It's an interesting bit of spin. This is going to come as a shock to you, Cam, so I'm glad you're sitting down. Criminals don't do background checks. They get their guns.
What?
Yeah, believe it or not, they get their guns through straw purchases, through friends and family members who have not yet been convicted of crimes. They get them through theft. They get them in person-to-person transactions, which, by the way, even when those are implemented into law, people do not do it. You can ask Colorado about how well their little plan went through. And so, he's basically blowing smoke. Background checks, again, have the goal of tracking everybody's firearms as a de facto gun registry. If you know nationwide where every gun transfer has taken place, it is very easy if a government decides to outlaw a firearm, as they have in other countries. Say, we've got this registry, we know who has what, we can go take it. When you have a free country where citizens are allowed to sell their private property without the government interfering, it's much harder for a corrupt or tyrannical government somewhere down the road to confiscate these firearms and enslave a citizenry. In the 20th century, 262 million people were killed by their own governments. And a prerequisite for each and every one of those genocides, or actually the technical term is democide, in each and every situation, gun control, quote unquote, for the good of the citizenry, for the safety of the people, was a prerequisite. A armed nation where the government does not know where everybody's guns are is much, much safer on the larger in the larger picture.
All right. Well, let's also let's because I know that some particularly some gun control advocates say poo-poo to that argument, Bob Owens. Why are you saying that the United States is in danger of becoming one of these dictatorships? And I know that's not what you're saying. But you're saying you don't know what the go ahead. But actually hold your thought for 1 second if you don't mind.
Absolutely.
Because just from a very practical standpoint, let's look at the gun control proposal in Washington State right now, I-594.
Mm-hmm.
If this passes, it would be a crime, Bob, for you to go to Annette Wachter's place, the 30 cal gal, and for her to loan you a firearm while you were there to shoot without you undergoing a background check. Even if you gave it back to her at the end of the afternoon, that would be a crime. It would be a crime for people to conduct a class of adults, helping them to learn to be safe and responsible with firearms without each and every one of them undergoing the background check before, and then the owner of the firearm getting the background check to receive the firearms at the end of the day. Look, we only have a finite amount of resources here for law enforcement and for the criminal justice system. Where we focus our attention is vitally important, as David Kennedy just said. We just talked about this earlier in the interview. If you focus on those few individuals who are committing the violent crimes, you're able to see a huge reduction in violent crime. If instead you cast that wide net over all the law-abiding folks in the hopes that you're going to snag a couple of these violent offenders. That doesn't really work that well.
Oh, absolutely. You know, what you're ending up doing is instead of having police officers out on the street targeting the relatively small number of criminals, you end up with law enforcement agencies having to hire clerks to do paperwork. You know, I want my police agents, my law enforcement agencies out there catching bad guys and putting them in prison. I don't want some poor police chief or sheriff having twice as many clerks as he does deputies or officers just because somebody passed a law that they thought might be able to snag a few people, almost in a catch-22. We're gonna pass a law to trip you up. Not that you were a natural criminal intentionally breaking the law. We're going to create circumstances to turn you into a criminal. What are you saying about your trust of a citizenry that way?
Yeah, it wasn't, Bob. I know we're keeping you here, but one final question, because I seem to recall during the debate in Congress recently not recently, but during the Manchin-Schumer-Toomey legislation, it was asked, so how many of these people who failed the background checks, how many prosecutions were there? And the answer was some infinitesimally small number. And that question was sort of poo-pooed, I believe, by a Congress critter who called them paperwork violations. They're paperwork violations. We don't actually prosecute these things. But when we issue a denial, then magically we have prevented a crime from being committed, which is not, I would posit, the same thing.
I would agree with you 100%.
Do you remember that quote? The guy who, somebody saying that this was just paperwork violations?
I can't remember who had the quote, but I remember it was something like maybe 70 prosecutions out of 12,000 or something actual crimes, and out of 2 million denials, most of which were just your name is too similar to somebody who shouldn't have a gun, or your paperwork isn't, something on file is incomplete. Most of them were just wasting the time of the FBI NICS checks folks. They weren't stopping criminals because criminals, as a rule, don't go to gun stores to buy guns because they know they can't get guns there. So
yeah. I found the quote. It was Milwaukee Police Chief Edward Flynn, and it was during a Senate Judiciary Committee hearing. Senator Lindsey Graham asked John Walsh, the U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia, this is from the Washington Post, why the Obama administration pursues so few cases against people who lie on their background checks. He said, how many prosecutions have you taken up for failing a background check since you've been U.S. Attorney? John Walsh, U.S. Attorney for the District of Colorado, said, off the top of my head, I'm not aware of any. Milwaukee Police Chief Edward A. Flynn said that these specific types of prosecutions were largely a distraction. He said, quote, it's a paper thing. I want to stop the 76,000 people who are buying guns illegally. If you think we're going to do paperwork prosecutions, we're wrong. And now you have gun control advocates saying, well, the primary focus needs to be on this mechanism, which would lead to, quote unquote, paperwork prosecutions.
It's about manufacturing crimes to increase control over the people. That's what it boils down to.
All right, Bob. Listen, I appreciate you coming on the program, sir. We're going to continue to try to make sense of this incoherent position that the gun control advocates are taking, the increasingly incoherent positions, I should say. But thank you again, sir, for joining us on the program. Have a great week.
You too. Take care, Cam.